Come.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mahima. Have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Mahima is from Faridabad,
Yes, sir.
Haryana.
Yes, sir.
Economics, BA, MA, optional.
Yes, sir.
Reading novels, walking, and following news of national and international importance. Okay. So first of all, why were you called Mahima? Whose Mahima have you increased?
Sir, my mother gave me this name, and she's a Sanskrit teacher. So she really wanted me to give some Sanskrit word, and Mahima means glory. So I
Okay.
think she considers me as her glory.
Okay, Mahima, if I were asked to tell me two things in favor of civil service and two things against civil service, or your arguments, if it's a debate and you have to speak both for and against,
Right.
so when you have to speak for civil service, and what are the arguments against civil service?
So for civil services, I would say that I think this job gives one an opportunity to help people. We have the power and the authority in this job to really help the people and implement the policies of the government. So I think this is one positive aspect. And yes, it is a permanent executive. So this brings stability in the government. So I think positive aspect is it.
Okay.
And if we were to argue against it, I think the problem itself is not within the civil services. The institution of civil services is not a problem as such, but there are certain leakages in the sense that there are certain corruptions and other aspects to bureaucracy that have come forward. And yes, I think this might be a sort of a problem, but overall the institution is a good institution.
Mahima, do you think if you take India as a whole, the future of India, do you think, normally, you see, why I'm asking this question is, take United States, one powerful country, take Russia, another powerful country. In both these countries, the teachers and the scientists are greatly respected. They are the most important people there. And here, civil service is regarded as perhaps one of the most sought after services. But a change is happening. Do you think we are now moving away from the generalist to the specialist or not?
So, sir, there are demands of having specialization in civil services as well. So, we have the institution of lateral entry that we've introduced here. But overall, I think the general aspect of civil services is what is desired. Specialization is something that we can bring in later on by introducing training into that aspect in which the civil servant is working. But generalization, I think, is more of the demand right now.
Okay. Can you tell me the role of public sector undertakings, PSU, in India's economic development?
So the PSU came up in the 1950s after the independence. So we focused on the public sector as the medium of generating growth, because public sector's major objective is to be inclusive. So the most important aspect is creating employment in India, especially in the early periods of independence when there was very low employment and economic indicators were also very poor. So in that way, public sector was created as our Prime Minister of India during that time, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, said, there are temples of modern India. So these are the ones that will create growth, which will be inclusive.
So one reason you said that it was to provide employment. What are the other reasons or the purposes which public sector undertakings?
So, sir, the other important aspect of second 5-year plan was manufacturing. So India wanted to focus on manufacturing sector, which is why the public sector enterprises were created, and they would be the one that would undertake the large scale manufacturing that the private sector could not have taken at that time due to paucity of funds.
Okay. And just one or two more reasons were there. Public sector undertakings were taken to the backward areas of the country.
Right.
Private sector was not willing to go.
Yes.
And public sector was a model employer. Private sector was exploiting people.
Yes.
So, and the corporate social responsibility, which is now here. So the social obligation was not met by the private sector. Someone from the public sector had to do that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mahima, recently Supreme Court has held that the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners must be appointed by a body comprising of Chief Justice of India, Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition. How do you view it? Is it a judicial overreach or judicial creativity or performance of the role as the protector of the Constitution?
So, sir, the recent initiative by the Supreme Court, I believe this was done because the Article 324 of the Constitution itself has provided for the Parliament to create a law in this regard. And since the last 70 years, we've seen there is no law in this regard. So I think Supreme Court has acted as an initiator in this respect. It has nudged the Parliament. And I believe the judgment said that this is a temporary provision unless the Parliament creates a law. So at the end, the provision of legislature making is with the Parliament. So they will be the ones in the end who will be creating the law. So this, I would say, is an example of judicial activism.
Activism,
right,
in the direction of strengthening the Constitution and, making it achieve its objectives. Okay. Now, it is often said that Indian Constitution is a lawyer's paradise. What is your comment on that?
So regarding the length of the Constitution of India, I think, and the number of articles that it has, I think, yes, it is considered a lawyer's paradise because it is very difficult to decipher that whole book.
Okay. And do you feel that basic structure judgment of the Supreme Court, how do you view it, that particular judgment and the principle it had upheld?
So the 1973 judgment of the Supreme Court, considering the basic structure as the point that would be
inviolable.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is that part of the Constitution that cannot be changed, and I believe the provisions in it, for example, right, the equality or the federal provisions or the state-center relations, everything that has been put in the basic structure is actually what the...
So in one sentence, if you have to describe it, find its spirit, what would you say? What is amendment and what cannot be touched? That is the spirit. So just describe it in fewest possible words.
The basic structure is something that keeps Indian democracy intact.
Okay. In other words, that amendment does not mean replacement.
Okay, right.
You can amend, but you cannot replace wholesale.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
How has a thorough study of economics, how have you helped your family get better because you are a student of economics?
So the study of economics tells us how to use the scarce resources to the best possible way, efficiently. So I believe my contribution to my family would be to use our scarce resources that we have in the best possible way and to utilize them so that everybody in the family has access to the resources.
This is what you will do, or this is what you have done?
This is what I will do.
What have you done? You're a postgraduate in economics.
For the family.
Yeah. Starts from there.
So more than the economics aspect of it, I think my contribution to my family has been my socialist principles. This is what I've brought into my family, I think, and they have also understood those my principles of having an inclusive family that is gender neutral and also minimalist in its approach.
Okay. You know, Titanic was an unsinkable ship that sank on its very first journey. Lehman Brothers was a bank that was too big to fail. Now you have Silicon Valley Bank and you have Signature Bank. Why did Silicon Valley Bank fail?
So the Silicon Valley Bank is basically a bank that lends to startups, and so the deposits that are kept in this bank are also of the venture capitalists and the startups. So till the time they kept their deposits in the banks, it was okay. The bank was also using these deposits to buy treasury bonds of the United States, and the things were going fine only when recently we saw the COVID pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine crisis that impacted the startup business, and there was recessionary trend and inflation. So the startups started demanding their money. And also in the backdrop of that, the United States had, the Federal Reserve of the United States had started increasing the interest rates. So this meant that the treasury bonds that the Silicon Valley Bank had bought earlier from the deposits, the value of those bonds started declining. And they had to sell those bonds because they had to pay the startups that were now asking for their money. So I think the timing of this was the problem, that everybody started demanding money from the bank at a time when they did not have the funds.
So how the Indian public who keeps a lot of money in banks protected?
So the Indian banking system is different from the United States. So the Indian banking system has certain restrictions put on by the RBI. We have this CRR, the statutory liquidity ratio, and we have the capital adequacy norms. We have a lot of restrictions on the banking sector that protect the funds of the people. And also we have
What is the
deposit insurance.
major restriction or directions of RBI that makes an investor safe in banks?
So there's deposit insurance by the RBI of rupees 5 lakhs. So the poor people's money will be safe, will be secure.
That is one plus what else? Are they required to maintain a corpus of some kind?
The cash requirement ratio and the statutory liquidity ratio and the capital adequacy norms are the ones.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mahima, you are a student of economics. Huh? What are the challenges facing the Indian economy?
So the current challenges right now, I would say, are the unemployment, right, in the economy first. Then there's inflation that is currently impacting the economy. Then I think the agricultural sector. The structural problems in the agricultural sector have not been addressed in the past 70 years. So this sector, then female labor force participation ratio, I would say, is very below the 20% mark as well. So this is a big problem considering the demographic dividend that we are required to utilize in the current.
What about population? India is having the topmost population, more than China even.
Yes. So this year we
Do you think that India should follow China in controlling the population?
Sir, on the contrary, I believe that Indian population will serve as a demographic dividend to us. And Chinese one child policy itself is backfiring. Now they are turning into so in that way, I think the focus of our population policy should be, I think, education, educating people about the advantages of having a smaller family, but also utilizing this huge amount of potential that we have by educating them and providing the youth with employment and skills.
And what about the problem of malnutrition, poverty, joblessness?
So these
How
are
to overcome these factors?
So the social security measures that the government of India is following, I think these need to be improved further, and we need to provide especially security to the poor people and the malnourished. And yeah, more investments in this sector would, I think, be of advantage to us.
Okay, my last question is, government is very keen to privatize public assets, PSUs and other things, you know. Do you think it will be and they want to mobilize resources? Naturally, it is required for development. Do you think it is a good idea to move away? Are we not moving away from socialistic pattern of society, commanding heights and all that, to capitalist society, which will lead to monopolism?
Right. So, sir, it really depends on what aspect of it are we privatizing. So, if it's a public sector bank that gives loans to the poor people and it addresses the problems of the problem of exclusivity. So, in that way, I think we should not be privatizing these institutions. But if it is in those sectors in which basically there's business involved and in which the private sector can take advantage of that sector, I think there we can definitely do privatization. But in some sectors that require the state to be present for the people, those sectors cannot be touched.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mahima,
Yes, ma'am.
can you tell me what is Harrod-Domar model?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, India began with the Harrod-Domar model in the first 5-year plan. We focused on the Harrod-Domar model, which is investing in the infrastructure sector. And can I just take some time to think? Right. So, ma'am, it's the savings and investment sector. So, we increase the savings in our economy so that they translate into investments.
Have we moved away from Harrod-Domar model?
Ma'am, our focus has shifted in the second 5-year plan to the Mahalanobis model, which is mostly focused on industry.
Tell me, what are the assumptions in Harrod-Domar?
I cannot think of them right. I cannot recall that right now.
Do you know anything about solo growth model? It's all right. Tell me who won the Nobel Prize this time in economics?
In 2022, there were 3 people that won the Nobel Prize. So that was Ben Bernanke, Douglas Diamond, and D. Biggs, someone by the name D.
Who is Ben Bernanke?
He was the Federal Reserve Chairman.
What is his contribution to economics otherwise?
Ma'am, I know of the current, it was that they concluded that the bank runs were the major reason for banking crisis.
But isn't this so obvious? Isn't it just common sense?
Yes, ma'am, it is. But
Why were they awarded a Nobel Prize for this then?
I've not read too much into the reasoning of the prices.
It's all right. Tell me, what is the major focus of Keynesian economics?
Ma'am, the Keynesian economics came up in the 1930s as a response to the Great Depression. So the policies of Keynes were that the fiscal policy is much more important than not interfering. So before that, the classical economics was focused
But
on...
tell me, do we still see any kind of significance of Keynesian economics, especially when it comes to India, since it's a welfare state and you see a pandemic was there and we had fiscal stimulus also
Yes.
during that time. So does it have any relevance or has it lost its relevance?
Ma'am, I think Keynesian economics has a lot of relevance right now. Even the developed nations that explicitly do not say that they don't.
But then
support-
monetarists argue that it's not working anymore. Why do they argue that?
Ma'am, they focus on the supply side of it. For them, Keynesian policies or investing into the government, investing into the economy will bring in inflation.
Mahima, why is Fed increasing interest rate? We see there's this pattern of them increasing the interest rate.
That's because of the inflationary situation in the United States.
Is that the best way to handle it? Some people are criticizing it that that's not the best way to handle it.
So the negative impact of that is that it will discourage the investors in the long run. They will not be able to borrow money from the government. And for the United States, I think it's different for a developing economy and a developed economy. They have a formal banking system and everybody is connected to the banking system. So I think there it might work. Overall, we need to balance out the negatives and positives. But
Okay, Mahima, you see, we are increasing the credit interest rate, but yet we feel that our mission is to support the MSMEs. Don't you find a dichotomy in this?
I think the current issue at hand in India is that inflation has impacted the purchasing power of the poor, and that needs to be looked at in the short term. And for the MSMEs, the government is also coming up with a lot of programs. And
But if borrowing cost will be high,
Right.
how will MSMEs be profitable?
This is there needs to be an analysis on this, that the cost and benefit of this situation needs to be considered. So yes, after a point of time, it will become problematic for the MSMEs too.
All right, my last question to you would be, let's say your domestic help comes to you and tells you that she is abused physically by her husband every day. What will you do in that situation?
Ma'am, my first recommendation would be to leave that relationship, I would say.
But do you think she will listen to you?
Ma'am, but
leave that
my,
relationship?
I will still
How
have to
will you
provide-
try to help her? She doesn't want to leave the relationship. How will you try to help?
So I will bring both of them together and try to make the other person understand.
Isn't that work of a professional?
Right. So I can even bring in someone else who has a professional
All
work in
right.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very good. Outstanding.
Thank you, sir. Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.